You're listening to the Freio
Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Freio Music Podcast. I am your host, Michael Morahan. In this episode, I sit down with Dave Watts, the drummer and lead percussionist for the Motet. Dave started the band over 2 decades ago, and they are still crushing it. In this episode, Dave shed some light on how he's able to keep a band going for so long. And not only that, but how to stay at the peak of your musical abilities. He talks about managing your energy over the duration of a long tour and really some strategic insights that he's gained from his experience over the last 2 decades in the music industry. So, hope you enjoy this episode. Stay tuned.
This is Dave Watts from the Motet.
So, Dave, thanks so much for having me over.
Yeah, Mike.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
Let's go back to your early childhood. When did you first start up picking up the drums?
Oh, man. It's like pots and pans story.
Yeah.
The usual
in
drummer thing. Yeah, in the kitchen, in the living room, the bathroom, everywhere. I drive my parents crazy, you know. Chopsticks on a Quaker Oats, box, that kind of thing. And then, checking out the Beatles, classic rock groups, being inspired to be a drummer just because it's something different to do, very different than my family. I was kind of the black sheep. But, I just did the usual, like, middle school concert band. Actually failed. Had my sticks taken away from me. Miss Mackenzie took my sticks, man.
For what? What'd you do?
Just fucking off. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Throwing things, being dumb, not paying attention. Some things never change.
Yeah, that's great.
But I showed her.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? And then, played in a rock band in high school. I was like 15 playing with these 30-year-olds.
That's a big age difference.
Yeah. He was like picking me up in his Trans Am, lead singer, taking me to practice. We practiced in the basement of a pet store.
Wow.
And I just remember every time I finished a song, and we'd hear all these dogs like barking and shit. And be like, wow, I guess that's a good sign.
I guess they're cheering us on.
Exactly.
Well, what band was that?
That band was called Driver.
Driver.
You've never heard of us, I'm sure. It was like upstate New York classic rock cover band. Dirty, just the kind of scene that like you don't want to stay in too long. So by the time I got out of high school, I was like, get me out of this town, moved to Boston. I had family that lived there, so I had a little experience in Boston. Went to Boston University for a year, and then would walk over to Berkeley and see the guys playing over there, playing drums, till midnight in the rehearsal rooms, and was just completely jealous and realized that, that was my calling. So ended up transferring to Berkeley.
Cool. And that was, what age was that when you transferred?
I was probably 17, 18. I was in college a little bit early, so might have been 17.
Great.
Yeah.
And so you knew then that was your calling?
Yeah. I mean, at that point, it was like no looking back, right? It's like if I'm going to go to college for jazz, then, it's not like I'm going to decide to switch my career after I graduate, because that degree is not going to do me any good. It's not like the degree does you any good anyway. It's more about experience, and networking and connections. So that's really the lessons you learn in a school like that.
Great.
Yeah.
And when was the first time that you created a band? As opposed to joining an existing one?
Yeah, right.
Was that
right, yeah.
the Motet, or did you create anything before then?
I'm trying to think. I mean, little projects, but not a band that had any teeth. I was in a band in Boston called Chakra, and we used to tour out here. But I joined that band. They were already in existence. Right after I graduated school, I joined that group, and then we had the means to start touring. And bands weren't really touring back then. That was the grassroots wasn't really a thing, you know. You know, back in the 80s and before, it was like you had to have a record deal to tour, you know. And so it was always like, well, let's work out a record deal, you know, like CBS is going to come to our show. It's a showcase gig, and they're going to come, and then we're going to get signed. It's like people don't even think like that anymore. It's amazing how it's changed. But back then, if you didn't have that business behind you and the industry behind you, then you weren't going anywhere. You're local. So, but we got, you know, literally followed in the footsteps of Fish, believe it or not. Those guys were the first band that we knew of that were just doing it themselves. And
what do you mean by that, doing it yourself?
Oh, man. Like back in those days, literally if you spent the time and money to create a mailing list where you got your friends together and you like had a mailing list party and you put stamps and like return address, you know what I mean, on all these like postcards or even a newsletter like Fish used to do, it meant that you really were taking it seriously and you had a leg up on the competition and you were like gonna go somewhere, you know, at least more than most people you knew, because you're putting the time and energy into doing this grassroots thing, which people didn't do before that, you know. And we saw Fish doing that. It's like, oh man, this is happening right now. There's this like way to tour where you can actually reach people, but it takes time and money. Now it's like you send out an email, you know what I mean, from your website or Facebook, and it's free to hundreds of thousands of people or whatever, and it's free, you know. Like before we had to spend the money on the stamps to get your friends to come over. It took a long time. I mean, imagine licking 3,000 stamps, man. It's like that ain't easy. But like I said, we literally followed in their footsteps because we borrowed their mailing list for a tour we did to Colorado. And no one I knew of had ever been to Colorado, but because they went out here, we knew that it was some kind of scene. So we borrowed their mailing list, and we were the second national band to ever play the Fox back in 92. And we played the Fox. We had their mailing list. We sent out the mailer, and it sold out. And we did probably 2.5 weeks in Colorado, playing like 2 or 3 nights in every ski town. And it was the most mind-blowing experience. It was just completely changed our lives, and it changed my whole perspective about playing music live, you know?
And what were you sending to the mail list?
It was a postcard. On one side, it just had the return address and the, you know, the address that you're sending to, and a stamp.
And
the other side was just a printout of the shows, you know? It was that simple.
Wow.
You know, we never got to a point where we were doing like a mailer, like a fold-out sheet that like had all sorts of goofy stories like Fish did. But, you know, just doing that made a huge difference.
And talk to me about that from a business side. You know, you've been in the industry for a while now, and you've seen a lot of things evolve. You know, you're talking about sending a Facebook post, which is free, versus literally sending out mailers, which is coming out of the band's pocket.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's an investment in your fans, in your band.
Yeah.
So what are the big changes that you've noticed over the years?
Well, it's just gotten easier and easier to do that, you know. And we were talking about earlier, recording has gotten so much easier. You know, back in those days, it's like book the studio time and go into the studio, and then the engineer runs everything, and you're sort of at the mercy of however the studio is working. But it took a lot of money just to make a record. Not that it doesn't these days, but you can do it for a lot less, and you can do it yourself, and you don't have to be on the clock. You can be on your laptop in the basement and spend the time to be creative. I think there's a lot more possibility to be creative and to push the envelope with your perfection, you know? So now you can, I think it's, you know, it's in some ways it's harder because you keep up with the competition. So you have to be even more of a perfectionist about your efforts, but doing it costs less money, you know, and And like I said, the creative potential is huge. So that's all there now for bands touring. I mean, everyone tours now. Back then, it wasn't like everyone toured. So now everyone can do this thing, and which is now you got to cut through the noise, right? Like now there's all these bands doing it. How do you get people's attention? But it's just in so many ways, it's so much more satisfying now. It's instant gratification. You make the song, and then you put it out, and everyone hears it. You know what I mean? People know your music before you get there. Back then, it's like there was no way for people to know your music until you got there and you sold them the CD, hopefully. Then they brought it home and they played it for your friends. And the fact that they would play your music and some other people would hear it was huge. It was like a miracle. It felt like so exciting. I mean, we weren't even thinking about getting our music on the radio. We were just thinking about people hearing it at all. Now it's like everyone can hear your music instantly. So all you have to do is make it good. You know what I mean? Like that's all you have to do. Back then, it was like you had to make it good. Plus you had to fucking drive 3,000 miles, get on stage, impress somebody, and then sell them the disc for, however much. Okay, taking a break. I gotta remember that thought.
All right, so we were talking about the hustle.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you're sending out all those mailers.
Yes.
And nowadays is different.
Yes.
But you've still got to cut through the noise, as you said.
Yeah.
Now, as a musician, what's your main tool to cut through the noise? Obviously, I would assume it's the music.
Yeah, but it's the outlet, social media. It's like if you have your fan base and they're paying attention, then at least you have that. And then the degree to which that gets shared, is a little bit of a quandary. I don't exactly know how that works, Definitely some people do a really good job of the visual aspect of it, making videos that grab people's attention. We've never spent much time doing that, so I don't really have the knowledge about how that works or, really about what, you can do to improve that side of things, but that's definitely a very powerful tool, these days.
Well, I've seen some of your videos from Red Rocks. You've chopped it up into minute segments.
Yeah.
That's pretty powerful.
That's been definitely our best. Our Red Rock shows are definitely our best tool for grabbing people's attention online as far as the visual side of things go. And in fact, we're a live band. We're not a band like Wolfpack that does really well in the studio and has these creative, studio videos. We're a live band. That's where we put our energy. So it makes sense that would be the case. But, even just Spotify is a ridiculous tool. It's amazing what you can do with Spotify. By far our highest listened to song on Spotify it's not even really something we play live. It's kind of randomly caught on to some playlist. And I have no idea how to explain it. So
what song is that?
It's called Nemesis, and I wrote it probably 7 or 8 years ago. It's instrumental, and it's not really and sound anything like what we do right now, but for some reason it's caught on, and it's like it has a life of its own. So that there's like ways in which that world works that I can't quite explain, but like I said. The main thing is it has to be good. You know what I mean? You just got to make it good. And if you make it good, it's going to work for you.
So going back to your social media, being active there is super important. Are you individually going up on social media and posting on Facebook or Twitter, or do you have other members of the band or management, or how do you work that?
Yeah, through the Motet.
Yeah.
Facebook and all that. Yeah, we have management and social media team and people that do it. I used to do it back in the day. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it does.
I don't have time for that. Fortunately, now I can spend more time practicing drums and working on music.
It's great.
Yeah, it's great. But when I was just trying to think the other day when things kind of flipped for us, and I remember, probably like 2004. 2003, I can't remember. But around that time, we were doing shows and we kind of like had pulled back from touring a little bit. But I just remember thinking like, how are people going to know we're playing this gig? And the only way people will know is like you had the strip ad in the newspaper and you put up flyers around town, taping them to light poles and stupid shit like that.
The street team.
The street team, and it works, especially in smaller towns, but that was the only way that people would find out about your show. And you had no idea if they even knew because there was no feedback, Now it's like you can make posts, you can see how people are responding to it, and you get a sense of how well a show's going to do, and you feel like at least people know the show's happening. Whether or not they're going to go, it's like, it's still a crapshoot, but at least you know. So when things started to switch, like when I got my first laptop and social media started kicking in, it's like, oh, Facebook, people are paying attention to Facebook, and you'd make a post and all of a sudden there'd be a bunch of comments like, oh, people are paying attention. It was a game changer. It really made me realize that, if you put energy into that world, you can make a difference. And then it became this band to audience communication and connection. It wasn't just from the stage. It happened, all week long if you wanted it to, so that connection, which is huge. I mean, think of back in the day, people used to have fan clubs. The Beatles started, that sort of thing, a fan club, like a way for the band to interact with the fans outside of the live show. So that all of a sudden became a huge reality once Facebook kicked in. It was MySpace, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then it was Facebook. But Facebook became a real tangible sort of immediate way to see the interaction happen. So once that happened, I really dug in. I think in the first 5 years, it was just about playing music and going around touring and having fun and exploring music. And then it became like, okay, if I put real time and energy into the management side of this, into the business side of it, we can actually get off, sleeping on couches when we're touring,
And what were some of the key insights from when you pursued the business side of things?
Well, that's a good question. My first real business decision was deciding to call the band the Motet and just having it be a name that remained the same regardless of lineup changes. Because I had been in so many bands that once the lineup changed, the band kind of folded, like it wasn't the same band, wasn't the same sound, and we've changed lineups and sound over the last 20 years a bunch of times in kind of an organic way. But I knew that at least if the brand stayed the same, the name stayed the same, we could keep building it,
The efforts wouldn't have to be erased afterwards.
Yeah, you have to start from scratch every time.
Yeah.
So that was like the first effort, or first good decision I made, I think, towards that.
Nice.
But then, I tell a lot of bands, someone asked me this the other day, like, what's the best piece of advice for a young band? It's like, grow your home market, make your home market really strong, because what happens is bands want to tour right away and they come home and then their home market is just like another play, like anywhere else in the country. And it shouldn't be like that. You really should make people relate to you like you're their hometown band, like you're their band, and your best chance to do that is where you live, for many reasons. But that's really crucial because you need to build capital to tour and you need to sort of recharge your batteries. When you come home, you want to have that big show. I'll tell a band, like, don't put, your big hometown show at the end of a tour, the last day of a tour. Like if you're touring for 3 weeks and then the final Saturday is your big hometown show, you're going to be burnt out and tired. You know what I mean? Like put that shit like 2 weeks later or whatever. So you have time to chill and rehearse leading up to it and do some different stuff for it and make it special, So those hometown shows are special. We used to do Halloween every year where we do a different artist for Halloween. just to pay tribute and to really like learn the music of these artists that we respected. And that became a real connection to the Colorado community, because people are like, oh, this is the show every year, it's happening, you know, and they're so excited about it. It just helped build that connection and community with Colorado and us being a Colorado band. So that's always been huge for us. And that, I don't think we'd be where we are right now if it weren't for those shows.
That's great. Now, going backwards just a little bit, you're talking about, you know, managing your energy during the tour so that you have your big show on fully charged batteries, as you said.
Yeah.
So, you know, working in the music industry for so long, you know, you clearly know how to continue making music decade after decade.
Oh, yeah.
And that's awesome, you know, and not too many people can really stay with a single act for so long.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, what would you attribute your ability to continually evolve the band, but yet still keep the soul of it intact?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think having the variety of music, you know, the music that we've played over the years has definitely kept it interesting. Even changing up the lineup has kept it interesting. So there hasn't been a sort of burnout factor. And we've sometimes we've toured a lot and sometimes we've not toured a lot. It's been very flexible, you know, which is important.
And where do you draw those lines? Like, when is it time to go for it for a month? And when is it time to just sit back and absorb?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, and it's really a group effort as far as making those decisions. So it you know, you can only sort of make that decision yourself, you know. But I think you can tell. It's like if you're spinning your wheels and it feels like things aren't moving forward, then yeah, take a break. But you don't have to be like, oh, it's falling apart. You know what I mean? You just take a break. You know, slow it down. It's fine. You know, music isn't going anywhere. I think that if you look at it like goal oriented and we have to be here by this time or making this much money by this time, then yeah, you might end up throwing in the towel when it doesn't reach those goals. But it's good to have a vision. But the vision is the most important part, not the end game. You don't have to like get to where your vision, you might have seen in your vision, because that ends up becoming contrived, you know, and the vision might give you ideas and then it gives you inspiration and you start working on it, but it's going to shift and change, you know what I mean? Which is fine. So, you know, I think that, you know, you just got to feel it out, you know, in the end, it's the music that matters. It's the creativity that matters. If you're not being creative, if you become a cover band of yourself, then, you know, fuck it, change it up. You know what I mean? Which is fine. I mean, we've knocked it down to like 20 shows a year at one point, you know. I don't, you know, it's like if we just did like 24 shows the next year, but they're all really good shows, it's like, okay, every show is going to be different and it's going to be cool and it's going to be fun. And maybe in between those shows, we're going to write music, you know. So there's always something to do. Being creative is the most important part, you know. And even if we had spent less time playing as a band, it would give us time to do side project stuff. And then when we did side project stuff, we'd bring it back to the band, and then we'd have more energy and enthusiasm for what we're doing as a band. Or I've been to Cuba twice to study bata drumming. That to me was really inspirational at the time to where I wanted to go musically with the motet. So like not playing at all, you know, as far as, you know, the motet or some other side project goes, but doing something else musically that all leads to a positive end, you know? So I think that, you know, it's more about, it's not what you do, it's what you don't do. It's like, don't spin your wheels. Don't, you know, push yourself to try so hard to do something that's like, it's taking away from your creative energy. You know, that's the main thing. So there's no way to predict, there's no formula, but, you know, it's like, you know, as a person who wants to stay healthy, you got to listen to your body, you know? similar thing with the dynamic of a band,
Absolutely. Now, why was it important for you to travel to Cuba to study bata drums, as opposed to study it from afar or try and take a lesson here in Colorado?
Oh, well, that particular style of music is very cultural. It's not just about the patterns and the parts. I mean, that stuff's all amazing. It's an incredible language. Bata is the music of Santeria, but that's a religious music of Cuba, and so it goes in tandem with the ceremony. So if you really want to feel and understand what bata drumming is all about, you want to be a part of ceremony, and see what the ceremony is about. So going there and being a part of, Santeria ceremonies really made a huge difference. And then also being in Havana and being surrounded by that culture, then studying with our teacher down there really made the whole thing, easier to absorb. So it's the sort of thing where you can't explain until you go, but Cuba is such a petri dish of culture. When you get down there, you realize that, music goes so much deeper there than it does in the States. It's not like just a party thing, people love to drink rum and go to rumbas, but at the same time, it's like music becomes this spiritual thing, that's beyond entertainment. So it's a game changer when you become part of that.
Are there any other cultures over the years that have inspired you musically?
Well, most African-based music, man, it's like I love all that. The Brazilian music, and the sambas, batucada, African music, West African drum and dance. We used to get into a lot of that stuff, all the doon parts, how it transcribes to a drum set, Afrobeat, Fela's music has been a huge influence on me. I love that stuff, and I've studied it and played it a bunch, and we had a Fela cover band for a while, so really it's the African, being a drummer, it's the African music that gets me excited, and the African diaspora, wherever it ended up, in America or in the West Indies, in the Caribbean, all that really has made a huge impact on me. It's like, that's what one of the threads in the motet, it's drummers' music. Even though now we're more song-oriented and funk is like our thing, especially, funk of the late 70s and early 80s. That's really our vibe. And it's way more song-oriented than it used to be, but it's still drummers' music,
Now, when you're playing live, are you running any software back there behind the kit?
No, I used to. Yeah, I used to. We were messing around a little bit. We used to, let's see, probably 2005. Our horn player back then was Dominic Lully, who's now the lead guy in Big Gigantic. And we all got laptops around the same time. And we were just like messing around with it, And I remember Dom was like, check this out, and he'd throw some tracks at us. And we ended up doing a little side project because Motet was slowing down a bunch at that time. And we just called it the Motet Trio because it was cheaper to tour as a trio. And it was me and Joey and Dom. And we go around, and Joey had a bunch of songs that he had tracks he had worked up that ended up becoming the tracks for another side project we have called Juno What. That's Joey's electro funk thing. I was messing around with some stuff, and then Dom was running tracks that ended up, being the beginnings of Big Gigantic. But I remember at the end of one of the shows, he was playing tracks, and the audience was going nuts. And I was like, "Dude, this is pretty good, man. You might want to check this out."
Explore this a little further.
You might want to explore this a little further, yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, he was like, back then we were all broke as fuck, and he was eating peanut butter jelly sandwiches on the bus because he couldn't afford to go out and get, food with the rest of us. And he, he'd stay on the bus working on his laptop, working up tracks, and now he's crushing it. So yeah, that was the beginnings of us using electronics with our sound. And I used it with Motet for probably 6 years, and then made 2 records, Instrumental Descent and Dig Deep. Both had, doing laptop loops and that sort of thing, messing around with the kind of EDM vibe. But eventually it was just like, this pain in the ass touring with a laptop. It's just so much easier to play live,
No clicks.
Yeah, we don't need
no
that
alignment.
stuff, I mean, sometimes I'll mess with the click live just to set the tempo straight, but no, we don't run any tracks here. I like it a lot better. It's improved our ability in the studio, to go in and not have any crutches. Just go in and try and play our music live as possible in the studio and be efficient,
So when you're playing a live show, like bring me back to your first Red Rocks set. Were you super nervous? Was it natural? Were you expecting to be there?
Well, that one of the first ones, we opened up for Humphreys and, just an opening set. So it was like during the day. It wasn't, because we're in Colorado, man. It's like all our friends, the first like 30 rows, like everyone we know, it's actually, it's funny. You go to Red Rocks and it feels like this such a, when you're in the stands, it feels like such an epic venue. And then you're on stage and it feels kind of intimate because it's so steep and then you got the rocks there kind of, pulling everything in. It doesn't feel that intimidating. And then the second year we played, we played with Lettuce, and this storm came through that just crushed the place, like literally lightning everywhere, waterfalls coming down the rocks and the stairs, people hiding under trees. You know what I mean? Like the girls all were dressed up coming in, and it was just when they came back, it was just like makeup everywhere and like everything soaked. I mean, it was crazy. And they cleared the whole place out. Everyone had to leave. And then they let everyone back in, and the whole place filled right back up. There was like 10,000 people there. But I think because of that storm, it kind of like knocked us off of our sort of, being nervous. We were just like, oh, okay, this is going to work. This show's actually going to happen. So we threw down. It was a great show.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me about just when you're performing live, mentally preparing yourself. And at the same time, being the drummer, you are the foundation of the rhythm. But do you get to kind of sit back and listen to the vocals, or are you so focused on your rhythm that you kind of pull yourself away from? I mean,
you listen to
listening
everybody.
Too much.
No, it's a balance for sure. You got to like hear and listen to everybody for sure, especially in the improv sections. Mostly I listen to Garrett, my bass player, that he's the main one I want to hear. We have in-ears now, and we have an in-ear system where we can control our mix just from our iPads, which is a game changer for us. So now we can hear everything a lot better.
So everybody's got the perfect mix.
Yeah. But there's no sitting back, not in this band. There's no, I see some bands and it's like, wow, that drummer's got it easy, man. Like you just feel like you can kind of go through the motions and it's pretty chill. But our music's not like that. Like our music is, I feel like, especially because I feel like I'm trying, I almost have to stop trying so much because I have so many ideas and I have so many things I'm working on at home. And I bring it to the stage and sometimes it can get distracting if I'm trying too many ideas. But for me, it's constant. When I go off stage, I want to be sweating, I want to feel like I just worked out. I want to feel like I'm a different person than I was when I walked up, which has to happen. I kind of actually, when I first start a show, if I'm not quite warmed up, I have to take it easy and let myself warm up without having to push too hard. But by the end, I want to be able to push as hard as I can, and feel like physically going somewhere.
What you gonna bring today? Ain't got the time to waste. You better believe.
That's awesome. Now let's talk about one of your tracks, That Dream.
Yeah.
First of all, nasty drum intro.
Oh, sick.
I mean, throughout the whole thing. But, talk to me about it. I don't have the vocabulary to describe the rhythm that you're playing. Can you describe for the listener a little bit?
Shit. I don't know, man. Kind of like that. Yeah, I try to syncopate it a little bit, mix it up, and not just have it be a backbeat thing to make it more interesting. Sometimes when you do a 16th note funk groove, Garibaldi style, and Mike Clark style, you have the leeway to mix up the backbeat, so it's not just 2 and 4.
Tell me about how you guys created it, how you envision the drums. You talk about not being on 2 and 4.
Oh, yeah. And I think I was messing around with the funky drummer idea, the James Brown groove. And so, Jalbert, our guitar player, he gave us a demo, and he had some just random loop going. And so basically what happens is we'll send out demos to each other for most of this stuff. I can tell you about how I brought a song in as well. But for a lot of the times, the guys will send a demo, and we'll listen to it at home, and I'll play along to it. And sometimes I'll get the guys to send me the tracks without the drums, and then I'll come up with the part. But just to be as efficient as possible, if we can do that kind of homework, then we walk into the studio. We try and write the song, the basic groove of the song, as a quartet before we get the vocals and the horns involved. That way it's more focused rehearsal. So we'll work on the tune. I'll record it. We'll work on whatever groove we've got going on. I'll record it and then send it out to the guys, and then we'll sit at home and see if it works, what feels good, what doesn't. If we need to, we'll go back in and work on it more and try and just to get it to feel good. You know what I mean? It has to feel good. I tell these guys that, like, there's no sense in playing a song that we can't play live, on a record. I don't want to work on a song for a record that we can't play live, And if we're going to play it live, it has to feel good, I don't want to play a song live that I'm up there just being like, ugh, I hate this part. You know what I mean? I want to be like, yeah, this shit is fun. And it's fun for me to play, and it's got to feel like me. You know what I mean? I can't feel like I'm imitating somebody else. It's got to feel like me. A decent amount of time on that groove, just trying to come up with something different that felt good for me. And I'm still working on it, to be honest with you. Sometimes you play something in the studio and it feels good and you got it nailed, and then you take it live and it's like, you got to change it up a little bit. The live experience is a little bit different. You might need to change the tempo a little bit. You could definitely change the arrangement of the song a little bit, make it work for the live experience. Sometimes you're playing harder live, so you got to change the way it feels, just in your hands, the sticks hitting the drums. You have the luxury in the studio of playing a little quieter, and it can still be, effective. But live, sometimes that doesn't work. And also the drums are different. My live kit is different than my studio kit. So that ends up affecting how I play. So even with that song, it's taken me a bit to figure out how to play it live and make it feel good. Yeah.
Great. Now, how do you self-reflect when you're up on stage playing? You know, you're saying, "Oh, I might be playing too loud or too hard." You know, how do you find that balance?
Man, I lately I've been recording every show from behind the drum set. I'll set up my Zoom behind the drum set, and which means I can just hear the drums and the bass and a little bit of guitar from where it's
And you're using
situated.
Mics,
Yeah,
on the Zoom.
yeah, I've got the little capsule I put on there, and man, that's a good one because it's very stark rendering of your performance.
And it's right behind you, so you get the same picture that you're listening to as you play.
It's great, man, and it really. You hear every nuance, you hear every like push and pull that you may or may not want to be there, you know. So and the dynamic thing too. So listening back in some ways is the only way to know, you know, what's working dynamically. Sometimes I can be into it and you know, playing hard and be excited and being like, yeah, this is killer. And of course, you know, you can't always tell from the audience because they might just be into it regardless. But then I'll listen back and be like, oh, God, I'm overplaying, you know. I'm playing way too hard on my ride cymbal, playing way too loud on my hats. You know what I mean? Like something's not working like dynamically. So, you know, doing that, recording myself, I would recommend that to every drummer. You know, I would do it at home when I'm practicing, but I only have so much time to listen back. So when I'm at home shedding, I just work with the click and try and like hear what I'm doing, you know, when I'm practicing at home as much as possible in the moment. But yeah, live, it's great, man. Just putting that Zoom behind me and then listening back. Sometimes I'll go on a bike ride and just listen to the track of, you know, the weekend show and see like how things were feeling.
That's great advice. I think it's super important to listen back to yourself.
Yeah.
Probably no matter what you play. If you play guitar, vocals, you know, you could do the same thing. You know, listen to yourself, figure out those nuances.
Man, yeah. It's hard. Like it's especially in that format where it's very dry and you're up front. You know what I mean? It's like it can be painful. You know, like, you don't always want to do that. You're like, sometimes I'm not in the mood to listen back to myself. I'm like, I don't want to like get depressed right now. But, you know, it's good to kick your own ass like that. And once you do it enough, you start to know your own playing enough to where it's like you don't get surprises. You know, I used to be like, didn't listen to myself at all. And then I'd listen to myself every now and then and be like, ugh, that doesn't sound anything like I remember it, you know? And it's true that you don't, it's like listening to your podcast, your own voice. You know, if you don't listen, the first time you listen back to yourself, you're like, I sound like that. Exactly. So it's like that. If you do it enough, then it takes away that shock, and then you can kind of address the problems without being afraid of it and without being reactive and, you know, just like in denial. You know what I mean? You can just be like, oh yeah, okay. I do that all the time. I always rush that fill. You know what I mean? And you're not surprised by it. You're like, okay, how can I fix it? And then when you do hear it better, then you're like, oh, it's better now because I worked on it this way, because I changed this. You know what I mean? Like you can start to see yourself improve because of certain actions you take and you're noticing it, you know, and then maybe it gets to a point where you don't have to listen back so much because you're like, yeah, that's what I sound like. I know what I was going to sound like. You recognize it more in the moment. You know what I mean? Which is kind of important to recognize the flaws that might be happening in the moment as opposed to needing to listen back. But it's a great tool, man.
Great. And just for anybody listening out there who might not be familiar with the Motet, where can everybody find your music?
Spotify. If you go to Spotify, we have a Bandcamp, you know, the Motet on Bandcamp. You can download our tracks there, but if you go on Spotify and look up the Motet, you're going to find all of our music. We have a YouTube channel, and then themotet.net or .com. And you can get to our website and you can find access to all that there.
Great. And is there anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners, with our audience, with the world at large?
Yeah, we got a new record coming out.
All right.
Yeah, the new album's coming out in January.
Any teaser for the name?
It's called Death or Devotion.
Okay.
Yeah, it's named after one of the songs. But we're pretty proud of it. It's great. We recorded the whole thing here in Colorado. And we got great sounds, and we feel really good about the material. This is the first album that our singer Lyle has co-written with us from beginning to end, so it feels really cohesive for the band. And we're already playing all the songs live, and they've been doing really well. Like, audience response wasn't great, so we know that they're gonna translate, from the record to the stage, and that the songs they're not going to be throwaways, which is nice. It's a good feeling. And like you said, we've released, That Dream. We released a song called Compatible. Oh no, that one hasn't come out yet. We released a song called Supernova.
Yep.
We released a song called What You Gonna Bring, and we released a song called Get It Right. So there's 4 songs that have come out early, and then Compatible is coming out in January. And then the whole record's coming out at the end of January.
And are some of those songs going to be in that record?
All the songs are in that record. Those are all like, pre-release tunes, which you can do nowadays. It's kind of nice. You can release singles before you put the album out. Kind of like, it's good to actually have people know the music before you do your CD release show or whatever. Like we've got the Red Rocks show coming up. I guess we didn't mention that.
Yeah.
July 12th. It's our next Red Rocks show with Galactic and Moon Hooch. But it's gonna be a great feeling to know we can go into that show and play all those songs, and people are gonna know those songs.
That's great, and I think that's an interesting marketing tactic too of breaking up the album into multiple releases.
Yeah.
And teasing it, getting some momentum going, pre-orders.
Yeah, because it's a pain in the ass to make an album, 12 songs all at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, do it all at once. It's like, it's a lot of work, So being able to stagger it and go in, record 3 songs, take some time off, play shows, release 1 or 2 songs, go back in. That's what we did for this record, over the course of almost 2 years from beginning to end. But it which is a little long for me. I'd like to knock it out quicker than that. But at the same time, there's a little more focus on each song, as opposed to like you get overwhelmed trying to do 12 songs at once, And I think it's a lot for the audience too. You get all 12 songs, downloaded at the same time. It's like, it's nice to get a tune here and there, and you can kind of like get into a song without having to think about the next one.
That's interesting. And where did you guys record this latest album?
Oh, it's Scanhope Sound down in Inglewood.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for taking the time to talk with me.
Mike. Appreciate it, dude.
Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
You got the groove, it's in your eyes, moving so good you got me hypnotized. I can't control it, it's taking hold, feel like my body's about to explode. We can go now that you're getting, what's this like if you ain't living? Made it to the night after working all day, now is the time for you to go ahead and get it.
You've been listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.
Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music. You are listening to Freio Music.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Stay tuned.